Well, how's it going, everybody? I am the Goob, and I'm about a month post-hike from getting back home from the Continental Divide Trail. So I think it's that time to do a full overview of all the gear that survived this trip. So let's get right into it. There's a lot to cover. We'll kick things off with the big three. So first item up here is going to be the backpack that I took. This is the Durston Kakwa 40. This is the same backpack that I finished the PCT on. I did about 800 miles on the PCT with this one and did the entire CDT with it. Overall, I don't recommend it. It's the Kakwa 40 liter bag. It's too small for the CDT. It might be okay for the AT in the shorter food carries, but for me, I could barely manage to fit everything in this. Since I've bought this thing, Durston has come out with a 50 liter pack of the exact same style, so I would recommend the Kakwa 50. Overall, this thing held up okay. It's got a whole lot of miles on it, so it's at that point where everything's starting to fall apart. The chest strap buckle broke at some point, so I was using a safety pin to hold this thing together, and one of the hip belt pockets, the zipper completely disintegrated, so this is completely useless. I could never fully close it, so I was holding this thing together with some safety pins at some point. Overall, though, the main frame structure of the pack was still holding strong. It had no holes in it. But even though it is made out of Ultra 200, which is a waterproof material, it's not seam taped on the inside. So when it did rain heavily, water would still seep in. So it's just weird how they didn't seam tape it. That's one major downside, I think, to it. So you definitely need to have a liner bag with it. And as far as other things that I had on this bag is I always had a handkerchief for wiping snot and everything else that you need. I kept the Garmin Mini InReach clipped to my bag. This thing worked perfectly. This has got 2 full through hikes on it and it's still going strong. It's exactly what I need for tracking your progress and an emergency SOS button if you needed it. Also in the chest strap I carried a pocket knife in here, and when I was up in grizzly country for the last 1,000 miles on trail, I kept a bear spray in the other strap, and that worked out just fine. I couldn't bring that home with me for traveling on an airplane, so I've already donated that thing. But I think that's it as a general quick overview of this bag. In general, a lot of gear just doesn't last more than one through hike, and this is pretty much one of those items as well. It'll get you through a through hike. It'll do 3,000 miles, but not much more than that. And next up, we'll do the tent. I took the Nemo Hornet 1P. This is the same type of tent that I took on the PCT and did the whole PCT with that one. Again, one through hike is going to kill it. So I took much better care of this one. Here's the main tent itself, the rain fly, and some poles. The zipper is very fragile, and I destroyed the zipper on the first one of these that I had that did the whole PCT, so I was much more careful with this one. The PCT version of this also had some mouse critters or something that chewed some holes in it, but overall this one survived much better on the CDT. I took care of it that much better. It is a perfect small one-person tent for a guy my size, but if you were like 6'2", I think it'd be pretty hard to fit yourself in that thing. But I found a lot of places to pitch a tent on trail that were just the size of like one-person cowboy camping, and that was perfect just to set up this tent. And a lot of those kind of places, people use the Z-Pax duplex as like a standard tent platform size, a 2-person there. And a lot of places that I pitched up tent, you would not be able to fit a duplex. So I like having the small 1-person tent, and this one worked perfect for me on this trail. I'll probably keep rocking it, maybe just buying a new one for each trail as I go. And the last of the big 3 items to cover is going to be my sleep system. We'll start off with the pad I was using. This is the Thermarest Neo Air X-Lite. I've used these on all 3 of the long trails. They held up amazingly. I've never had any damage from any exterior element on a trail. No holes punctured in them. I've never had animals bite anything through them. The only damage I've had from these things was caused by a backpack I took on the PCT, punched holes in those, but as durable as these are, I'm betting I could have taken one pad and done the entire Triple Crown with them. So this one has survived the entire CDT and is holding up just fine. I don't like blowing those up with my breath manually, so I always pack out the pump sack that those ship with, and it makes way quicker for inflating those, so that's recommended. Rest of the sleep system items: a liner bag, This one's from Sea to Summit, more of a thicker winter kind of lining bag. Adds about an extra 10 degrees or so to your warmth rating, so I always like to have one of those. And when you're in town, it's way easier to clean your sleeping bag and everything else when you just throw the liner bag in the wash and you're good to go. I always take a pillow. This one I think is a new one that I took for the CDT. It's almost hard to keep track of all the items and which ones I've replaced over time on the different trails, but inflatable pillow I think was new for this trail. Survived the whole way, works just fine. For a pillowcase, I was using a buff. This one was a PCT buff that I got as a gift last year and survived the whole this trail. And the last thing was my sleeping bag itself, new for this trail. This one was from, oh man, I can't even remember now what sleeping bag it was. Possibly Enlightened Equipment, I think, but I don't know what variation. 20-degree bag worked perfectly. The stuff sack I was using was one from Z-Packs, was a Dyneema one, and those kind of break down over time, and you just kind of flake out and get Dyneema everywhere. So I ended up replacing the stuff sack with this Sea to Summit one that I bought, I think, halfway down the trail or so in Denver. But sleeping bag worked out awesome. Okay, so let's do clothes next. Everything I was hiking with directly on my person. The sun hoodie that I used. I absolutely love these things. Probably my #1 favorite piece of hiking gear from all the trails. This one's from BA Leaf is the company. Just some generic one off of Amazon. Cheap, easy. I started blowing out the shoulder towards the end of the trail. Similar thing happened on the PCT. Once these things have about 4,000 miles on them or so, they just start falling apart. This is the same one I finished like the last 800 miles on the PCT with and did all of the CDT. And it was just at the point where it was starting to break down. As far as the pants, Columbia, Silver Ridge, zip-off hiking pants. I love these things. I've taken the same type on all the trails. I just buy a new one every time. Again, they're only going to last about one through hike. The stitching starts to fall apart, and it was kind of at that point for this one too. One interesting thing on these pants is that they started out kind of a dark forest green, and if you can tell, just in the sun exposure of this trail specifically on the CDT, they've completely lost the color and they faded out to kind of this, I don't know what you'd call it, a darker gray kind of color. And by the time I'd gotten through New Mexico, they were already looking like this. So I don't know why I did that on the CDT with the sun intensity. Pants out on the PCT though did not suffer that fate. As far as socks, I was hiking with 3 pairs of Injinji liner socks. 2 extras and 1 on my feet at all times. I love these things. These last about half a through hike, so I got these new ones when I stopped into Denver, I think. And my main hiking sock is the Darn Toughs. These are the really thick boot socks. These things have been a trooper the whole way. I've triple crowned in these socks. I'm amazed I actually pulled it off. And it's right at the part, I think, where these things are starting to disintegrate. But no fault of the socks. I'll show the shoes here in a second. And the version of Oboes that had come out that I hiked the trail with this year have a little fatal flaw where they kind of wear out a little bit easier. And another pair of hiking socks I don't have anymore is the waterproof socks that I took. And those disintegrated and got holes chewed in them as a direct result of the hiking shoes, unfortunately. So they were starting to disintegrate my socks a little bit too, but hats off definitely for Darn Tough. They've got some darn tough socks for sure. The underwear. I had 3 pairs of the Ex Officio boxer briefs. I think having 3 pairs of like socks and underwear is the perfect amount for any given hike. That should do you just fine. Sleeping clothes. I have tops and bottoms of the Smart Wool long underwear, and I would only use these for sleeping in on really cold nights. I've got my town shirt. This thing survived the trail. Only wore this in towns. Same one I've used on all the trails and still holding up just fine. All those clothes I kept in its own little stuff sack. Dyneema bag from Z-Packs. This one's still holding up strong. I've seen like I mentioned, the Dyneema bags seem to wear and tear and start flaking out all over the place, but this one is still holding up nicely. Okay, let's show off the shoes. I finished the CDT, I think, with 3 pairs of these oboes. I can't remember the exact style, but they were kind of new for this year, and if you can tell a little bit on the inside, there's a lot more sensitive to just wear and tear and rubbing from where your ankle and the bottom, kind of the back of your foot, kind of rubs in on the shoe. Some reason, a little bit of a flaw in design there, and that was chewing holes in my waterproof socks and my Darn Toughs. For the insoles, I use the company's called Sole, and they're a really thick cork-bottomed insole, and just the combination of the thicker shoe and the insoles helps my feet. I'm very sensitive to walking on very rocky roads. Over those, I hiked with gaiters. The pair of gaiters that I started with already had some number of hundreds of miles on them from the PCT, and those wore out, and I had to get some new ones replaced somewhere in Wyoming, I think, and ended up finishing the trail with these. But I absolutely highly love and recommend Dirty Girl gaiters. I'm just the type of person who gets stuff in your shoes all the time. So I think that is it for the general clothing items. And next up, I think I'll cover the other miscellaneous clothing / cold weather gear items that I have. I carried a pair of warm gloves. Definitely needed these on a lot of nights. In general, the CDT was way colder than a lot of other trails, and I think it just had to do with the higher elevations on average. You're at 10,000 plus feet for a vast majority of the trail, it seems like. And a little stocking cap. This one was from Mountain Hardwear, I believe. Same one I've taken on the other trails. Still doing strong. Slept with this thing a lot of the times and wore it through the cold mornings. Other piece of cold gear was the Ghost Whisperer jacket from Mountain Hardwear. This thing's got a ton of miles on it. Also finished a Triple Crown with this thing. I'm surprised how well this thing's held up. Just from sleeping on it, or sleeping in it a lot of times on the cold nights and hiking cold mornings. This thing's gotten rained on just a little bit, soaked through, dries out just fine. Brushing past thorny bushes and trees and stuff, this thing's never got scraped up. It still has all its stuffing. I'm surprised as durable as this thing has appeared to be. It's going great. I've loved it. Let's see, hat. Outdoor Research sun hat. I think this thing's just at the point where it's starting to fall apart. Finished all 3 trails with this thing, and love it. I definitely love having a sun hat. Got a lot of sun exposure out on the CDT this year, mainly on the end of my nose. I like a good wide-brimmed hat, but I think my nose just pokes out a little too much out the front, and that's the only place really that got sunburnt on this trail. We'll finish up with some rain gear related items. I don't think I ever wore the pants out while hiking. I just use these in town when I'm doing laundry and I need to put something on so I'm not walking around naked in the hotels and things. And the rain top, I wore this a couple of times. We had a lot of good rain on the trail at CDT this year for some reason. It was a very unusually wet year. And I've also got this just generic lightweight build cap that I would use for my rain gear. I think you gotta have something on your head cap-wise to keep the rain hood from flopping down in front of your face when it's raining. Good protection there. Let's see, last miscellaneous clothing items are gonna be probably the little sandal water shoes I took. I only use these a couple of times for crossing some streams, and I think that's about it. This is one item where it's like, I really don't need to be carrying these anymore. I've carried these on all the trails, and they're not really worth the weight at this point, I think. I don't really get enough use out of them. Another item I carried and didn't use at all was the mosquito bug head net. I definitely needed this on the other trails, but I think that just goes to show how minimal the mosquitoes were out on the CDT, or maybe just the timing of where I was at. They just never got that bad. There were definitely some mosquitoes out there in some sections, but it was never bad enough to where I actually needed to pull out the bug net and use it. So, kind of glad I had it, but didn't need it. And it was light enough where it really didn't matter. Let's see, last item, I think, as far as rain-wise and cold weather protection was the little mitts. I'm definitely glad I had these. I definitely needed these on this trail. Just being a little bit extra cold and extra wet, it was awesome having those little gloves. You could just flip those on and keep your hands nice and warm and dry for as long as possible. And I think we'll do food and water related items next. So, as far as water procurement, I went through a couple of different water filters. The first one I started out with was similar to this, the Catadine Be Free. it had a good number of miles and months and liters filtered through it, so it lasted a couple of weeks, I think, through the desert section, where I noticed it was definitely slowing down and kind of not worth the trouble anymore, and I swapped over to the Platypus Quick Draw. The fatal flaw in that one is that the bag of that one was, instead of like a big round bag, it was kind of like two halves and then sealed together. And over time, as that one kind of inflated, deflated, you kind of roll it up and throw it in your bag, it got a little wear part in the side of it, and that actually popped a hole in the side of the bag. And that thing only lasted maybe a month or so before I had to replace that. And then finishing up the trail, I swapped back into the Katadyn V-Free filters. I absolutely love these things. But as with most filters, no matter what variation you're using, after about 6 weeks or so, it just gets clogged up, and no matter how you've back flushed it or rinsed it out or the best you maintain it, it still just kind of ends up becoming useless after about a good 6 weeks or so. Food storage. This was the same food bag that I've used on all the trails. This is the one I started with when I was not in grizzly bear country. From Z-Packs, their little food storage bag. It's worked out just fine for keeping everything organized in there. As far as cooking food, I had this little warm koozie pouch thingy that I would use when I was making ramen bombs or the instant mashed potatoes and tuna packets, so that worked out just fine. This was just a car sun reflector windscreen thing that I just kind of cut to shape and made a little pouch out of it. Easy to make. I got my titanium long-handled spoon, still going strong. It's been on all the trails. As far as the main cook kit for heating everything up, I've got the same little titanium cup. The stove that I was using for all the trails ended up breaking somewhere, I think, when I got into Chama. The threading on it has just worn down over time as you screw it into the fuel cans, and it pops off, and you screw it back on and pops it off, just wears out the threads. So by the time I got to Chama, that thing was just dead. So I ran into the little outfitters there and saw that they had some stoves, so I picked one up there. Let's see what else. I've got a little hygiene ditty bag. This has got my toothbrush and toothpaste, and I keep some little dental floss pickers in this thing. And that worked out just fine as far as keeping your teeth cleaned. Once I was up in grizzly bear country for the last 1,000 miles of trail, I picked up my Ursack. They've got several varieties and sizes. I can't remember exactly what this one is, but it feels like it's not very big, and the awkward shape I wasn't really used to, so it took a while to kind of figure out how to get this optimally in my backpack. And as I said before, the Durston Cockwell 40 is just not that big. It just needs to be a little bit bigger. I think their 50-liter bag would be perfect for something like the CDT. But inside the Ursack bag, they've also got this supposedly odor-proof sack that you can store everything in. And I think for the most part that all worked out just fine. I definitely was a lot better at managing my food safety needs from grizzly bears once I was up in that area and hanging it up in the trees and such like that. And luckily, I don't think anybody I know of ever had their food attacked by a grizzly bear, so that's pretty good. And I think that is all the food and water procurement related stuff. And next up I think we'll hit the electronics. Main battery bank I was using, same one I've taken on the PCT. This is a big 20,000 milliamp battery from Anchor, and I think this was a good amount. I might have gotten away with like a 15,000 or something slightly smaller, but it was just nice to have the extra power as I needed. I didn't need to be careful rationing it, so that was good there. Let's talk about the headlamp. I only use this a couple of times. I don't night hike in general. There were just a few times where I was up really early or late at night where I had to bust out the headlamp, but this is the Petzl Actic Core. This thing's been going great. It survived all the trails, but again, I've only had kind of minimal use with it, so it's been holding up fine there. Everything else electronically related, a lot of stuff is with filming and vlogging related. So the main camera I'm using was a new one for this trail, but the same version as what I used on the previous trails. The Sony ZV-1, my original one, survived the AT and the PCT, and it definitely had some wear and tear and some superficial damage, and it was moving a little slow. It had been covered in dust and grime and dirt and rain, and I didn't think it was going to survive another trail. So I bought a whole new Sony ZV-1 for doing the CDT, and this one's been holding up just fine. In the future, I am looking at other cameras, but I don't know exactly what I'm going to get. But just in general, it's a small enough, lightweight enough, compact enough camera where I'm not taking a big, bulky, full-frame camera with detachable lenses that weighs like 5 pounds in total. So the ZV-1 has been working out just fine. In conjunction with that, for filming everything, I was using a little tripod from Ulanzi. It's extendable about a foot or so, and it works great as a little selfie stick, or you can set it up as a tripod for getting some different shots there. For editing everything, once I had all my footage shot, I would transfer everything over to my phone. I think this is an iPhone 13 that I picked up somewhere about a year ago before doing the CDT, so it's about a year old. And it's been doing just fine and survived the trail, no scratches, never really dropped it, and I think we're good there. I've got all the cables and attachments that I needed for taking care of all that film editing needs and transfer needs and everything. I've got the multiple SSD storage cards for the camera, so I've got all the original clips. Someday, if I wanted to, I could put everything together and make some kind of master documentary style or whatever, but that's so much hours of footage and individual clips to go through. It'd be such a mess, and I'm kind of barely able to edit everything and put it out just for YouTube, so I don't know. I'm just not that great with as far as editing and stuff goes. But some other electronics things, I have a 1 terabyte SSD. I've taken this on, this one survived the PCT and the CDT, and I use this as a backup copy for all the master large version files of every single episode that I filmed. So I've got a backup there. Other miscellaneous items, I've got an extra battery that I take for the Sony camera, and this little case for it is also its little rechargeable thing, so you just plug right this thing back up to the battery bank or into the wall outlet and charge up the batteries that way. This was the wall charger that I brought from Anchor, and it's got USB-C and normal USB for charging everything up that I needed, and storing everything in a little tiny Z-Packs Dyneema bag, and this bag has been holding up just fine. It survived all 3 trails. It's not disintegrating or flaking away yet. I think about the last electronics item that I carried was a little pair of headphones, so I could edit and not bother anybody if I was kind of in the same hotel room with other guys sharing a place. I could be nice and quiet on my own. So I think that's it as far as all my electronic related stuff. Well, we're slowly getting to the end here. Next up is going to be the little blue ditty bag that I took. A lot of first aid and repair related items were in there. First thing up, this little bag has got the needle and thread, Leuco tape, some alcohol wipes. I think I used the needle and thread just to sew up my pants a little bit when I started to lose weight. I've always had to hem up about 1 inch on the waist on those for all the trails. And the Leuco tape, I think I only used once, I think, when a little blister started to form, and then kind of just Leuco taped over that and it went away just fine. In general, I didn't have any blister issues. This is kind of my main first aid kit bag. It's got some Band-Aids, Advil, and some Imodium. I think I used maybe 1 or 2 Advils when I had like a slight headache going on, but in general, nothing. No major issues there that I really needed anything for. I've got a little Swiss Army knife that I keep. This thing's great as far as a little mini scissors that's on here, and the tweezers, and fingernail clippers. Definitely need a pair of fingernail clippers out on these trails to take care of that every once in a while. I think that's it for everything else that's happening in my little blue ditty bag. And now I think we're down to just some of the last little miscellaneous items that I've got, like my toiletries. Always carrying some toilet paper with me, and the Deuce of Spades trowel for digging cat holes. I always keep a little bit of duct tape around the handle in case you need the duct tape. I don't remember if I ever needed to actually use any duct tape for this trail, but that's a good place to store it there. And I got a little pack towel for wiping out condensation and stuff that would get inside the tent sometimes. This worked out just fine. That's all you need as far as a towel. And I think the last thing that I've got is my trekking poles. I started the trail with the black diamond cork-handled ergonomic ones, and those ones were the poles that I had finished the PCT with. So they had a good number of miles on them, and at some point in Wyoming, I think, I had broken one of the tips off of them, and I had to get them replaced. I had kind of had enough of that version of trekking poles. And these were also from Black Diamond, cork handled, but not the ergonomic ones, so slightly different. And these things barely survived the rest of the trail. I did not like these ones. Just had a lot of weird, funky problems with them. Like the little clipping on them would always come apart. They just weren't tied down securely enough. I don't know. The tips were okay. They survived. They only had to do like the last 1,500 miles or so on trail with them. But I think I'm going to stick to the normal cork-handled ergonomic ones from Black Diamond, so I think these are going to go in the trash here pretty quickly. So that's all the gear that I've got right in front of me. I hope I didn't forget anything, but I may have. Something maybe I've thrown away along the way. Like I did remember to mention the waterproof socks, even though I don't have those anymore. But if there's something you think I forgot, go ahead and let me know down in the comments, and I'll try to answer if you have any questions on them. Or if you have any questions on the gear in general, go ahead and ask them, and I'll try to get back to you as soon as I can. But I think that's finally going to do it for this gear review of the CDT hike. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you all in the next one.